Hello everybody, this is my 37th review of films to come out in 2025, and today we are talking about The Naked Gun, directed by Akiva Schaffer and starring Liam Neeson, Pamela Anderson, and Paul Walter Hauser. This, of course, is a remake of the 1988 film directed by David Zucker. As fans of films, very few of us champion remakes. Remakes generally come off as uncreative, unnecessary, and major downgrades of the original. And while I am a fan of the original Naked Gun, and I didn't really expect this to outdo it, it is a movie that I don't really mind being remade. In comparison to other recent remakes like Snow White or Lilo and Stitch or How to Train Your Dragon, those films are just retreads of the same exact plots. They may even repeat jokes from the original film, so yes, I'm very cynical to their existence and I want Hollywood to stop making them. But a Naked Gun remake I think has potential because I figure it wouldn't just retread the same jokes and the same story and instead be more like a sequel. Just with a new cast and a modern coating of paint. And I feel like that's pretty much what we got. So, would I recommend The Naked Gun? Sure. It's definitely not as funny as the original, and I would recommend you see that over this film, but I enjoyed it overall. Liam Neeson is a good lead in this film. He kind of plays a similar character to Bad Cop in the Lego Movie. He's pretty funny in a comedic role, and while he's not as good as Leslie Nielsen, I can't really imagine a better pick for the leading role of this movie in a modern age. Leslie Nielsen was just very special. He had a way with this type of comedy. Whenever he's acting silly in these films, it just seems so natural for him. And while I definitely don't feel that way about Liam Neeson, he's definitely going all out for this role. One way in which I think this movie is actually an improvement over the original is pacing. If there's one thing I don't like about the original, it's how the film is paced out. Occasionally scenes just go on way too long, like the baseball game at the end just feels way too long to me. This film is almost exactly the same length as the original at 85 minutes, but it feels much shorter. There really isn't anything more for me to talk about other than the jokes. In terms of filmmaking and performances, everybody is doing perfectly fine, serves the movie really well. In terms of jokes, I do have some criticisms. Obviously, this is very subjective, but as I said, I do find this movie less funny than the original. I'll do my best to try to explain without spoiling the jokes for you guys. In general, I just smiled a lot more than I actually laughed. For the most part, I don't think this movie is like super duper funny. There are some very good moments though. There's a very high quantity of jokes that's very impressive to me. And very few of them were actually bad jokes, but there were a few. There's a couple of jokes I don't like in this movie that are just like, Liam Neeson likes this modern band, or Liam Neeson likes this like old TV show that you wouldn't expect him to like. Those were probably the worst in my opinion. It was just like references to other things, There are some jokes in this movie that I'd say are pretty predictable, which is something I can't say for the original at all. I feel like all the jokes are so out of left field. But in this movie, there's some setups for jokes that I think are way too obvious. So then when like the payoff actually happens later in the movie, it's like, yeah, I saw that coming. That's not that funny now. A few jokes kind of go on too long, and I wasn't really a fan of the jokes that made references to the fact that like this is a movie and broke the fourth wall. The first joke in the entire movie was a fourth wall breaking joke, and I was really worried at that point because it was very not funny. And it got a big laugh in my theater, but the movie got much better. Also, one other thing I prefer about the original is the use of music, or lack thereof. There's a lot less music in the original film, and I feel like it makes the jokes a little drier, which I like. This had a pretty generic action movie score that plays a lot, and it didn't ruin the movie or anything, but I just feel like a lot of modern movies feel too much of a need to have music all over the place, where it's just unnecessary and in some ways makes the movie a little worse. But overall, the movie has a very good sense of humor, and it has a very high quantity of jokes, which I thought was very impressive. Sometimes I laughed not even because I thought something was super funny, but simply because the jokes were adding up, like they were so rapid fire that eventually I just had to burst out laughing. It was like I was overwhelmed by the amount of gags going on. And one thing that I find so refreshing about this movie is that a lot of the jokes were told through filmmaking. The gags were accomplished through special sets and props and extras and makeup and explosives and special effects and funny editing. So many comedies are just dialogue, and they don't really use film as a medium to be funny, but clearly this movie put a ton of effort into all of the technical filmmaking to tell the jokes. I could definitely watch this again. I don't want people to get the wrong impression because I'm being very critical. I have to be critical, and I have to compare it to the original. But overall, I think this definitely will appeal to fans of the original movie, and it's just a very refreshing and creative quality comedy film. I was pretty torn between a 3 and a 3.5 out of 5 when I came out of this, but at this point I'm pretty certain I'm going to give this a 3.5 stars out of 5. Tomorrow I will make a review for Eddington. This is directed by Ari Aster. It stars Joaquin Phoenix, Emma Stone, and Pedro Pascal, so subscribe to see that. In the description I will put a link to my Letterboxd list ranking all the movies I've seen of 2025. Here's the ranking so far and where The Naked Gun is, and there is the rest of the movies on my list. There should also be a link to the YouTube playlist of all my 2025 film reviews. You can also find that on my channel page and right here on the left side of your screen. Thank you for watching. Comments and likes are very much appreciated. They help give me a boost in the algorithm. That's all I gotta say. See ya.